Okay, so we're up to Siman Tes Zayin. It's an important Siman. It's one sif, and it's the shear of a tallis. How big does your tallis have to be? So says the Mechaber, shear tallis shechayev besitzis. The shear of a tallis that is chayev and sitzis sheyischase ba'orach u'beroichav reishay. It's got to cover the length and the width. Reishay v'rubei shel cotton. Reishay v'rubei shel cotton. The head and the width of a cotton. Hamisalech levadei bashuk, who goes on his own in the shuk. Ve'ein tzorech acher l'shamro, who doesn't need anyone else to look after him. Says the Ramah, v'oz chayev besitzis v'dafka k'shagodel loiv shepa'omim arai v'yetzevo l'shuk. Dafka, if a godel would wear this occasionally when he would go into the shuk. So says the Mishnah Berurah, what does that mean? Says Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Nalev, hainu ben tes shonim. That if you have a child would wear it, and that would be enough, like a beged that would cover Roisha V'Rubai, the majority of a 9-year-old child who would go out into the shuk with this, then that is the minimum size of a tallis. Now we'll see in a minute what that actually means l'maisa. But Shuvas Ramin Simon Kufyud Mefalfel Hechiyotzim Medalad Knofes Haktanim Mizashir. How could you go out in a beged which is so small, which is only covers the majority of a child? V'chtoyref Devarov, and the main part of his answers are to mutzav leilech bohem leilech kol hayom b'li tzitzis. Better this than nothing, basically. This is a real minimum. Ubediv Darkei Moshe, and he, by the way, in footnote 1, in Dirsha number 1, he says, "Ubatam adov v'kosav b'shal shuvas teres lishma shekivin sheyesh b'zeichel mitzvah." Since it's a minimal size, but since it has a zeichel mitzvah, yesh schar al zeh, you get some reward for this. Or ke'ein ma shekosav hashulchan aruch lekamon. It's akin to, if you can't find a lulav kasha, the Mechaber says in Tov Reish Mem Tes, yesh dittel lulav pasel b'lei bracha. You take a lulav pasel without a bracha. So this is a zeicher, it's something better than nothing. Okay, says the vice in the Mishnah Berurah, better to tell them, to educate the people, they should make a bracha on the talis gadol, and that will pater this questionable, very small beged, which is a minimum share. It says Mishnah Berurah further, if you can make a larger one properly, how much better? Ad kan l'shoinu v'yaseh ha'ksofayim shel talis cotton rechovim. You've got to make sure the shoulders of the talis, of this small talis cotton rechovim, are going to be wide enough. Kadesh nikarim v'yaleim teras beged v'lo shem retzuis. There shouldn't be like little strings, like little straps on the shoulders, but there should be, substantial. So take a look at footnote 2. The Makar Devarov is the Machatz HaShekel. Shabir shemashekosov hamaril to lelesi avir dahaygis of haivir mevatla. That you shouldn't say that the avir of either side, i.e., imagine you've got a talis cotton. I brought my special Shabbos pair. Right? You've got a talis cotton, right? And you've got the shoulders. So these are substantial shoulders. They're not little strings going over. You've got the gap in the middle. If you've got a little string in the middle, you've got avir on this side, avir in the middle, and then it comes along and is mevatel the middle material. So says the Dirshu note number 2, the quoting the Machatz HaShekel, Shabir shemashekosov hamaril de lelesi avir dahaygis v'haygisa harzeh loshen mushal. This is a borrowed term. This is Hilchos Eruvin and other areas. The kavana is that the shoulders should be recognizable. That they have a name of a beged. So not just straps, but alma. Hachazon ish, kosav levayas divrei hamaril, kapshutam. He means it kapshutam, the Chazon Ish explains. That the two shoulders should be wider than the hole in the middle where you put your head. Since we're talking about deraisa, this is sitzis. He writes in the collection of letters, 21 centimeters, 18 centimeters. So I was very pleased to know, I get my ruler out, so I measured up the shoulder over here. Mine is about 22 centimeters, Baruch Hashem, and the gap in the middle I measured is also about 18 or something. So these must have been made according to the shiurim that the ideal shiurim of the Chazon Ish. So that the shoulders should be big, and it shouldn't be just thin straps you sometimes see. Okay, let's get folded over then. What?
If they get
Oh, we're going to come to that. Good point. Okay, let's carry on. Va'oz chayiv b'sitzis, sif cotton base. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Gadol haloivsha, a gadol who wears this minimal small beged which covers rosha v'ruba of a child. La'afukim ein by zeh hashir shal rosha v'ruba. Ozdu kulam potter. If it's less than that, then it's potter from tzitzis. Afilu im gadol yotzu baba kroy l'shuk. Even if the gadol happens to go occasionally to wear this tiny beged in the shuk. Achim derech anshe hamokum shagdolim yechu bo bekevel l'shuk vein misbaishin. If people go out with these minimal begodim into the shuk and he's not embarrassed, mashma dirabach t'chayv b'tzitzis. V'ayim b'beh halacha. Okay. Kasha gadol ben yud gimel shana goes out la shuk. Or Pesach Beitz of Rechav, lav dafka the shuk, or even anywhere into the streets, at the end of his front drive. But if the god is embarrassed to go out with such a small beged, lo choshev ktsus is not considered a clothing. Even if he wears it at home. The others say no. So long as it covers Rosh V'Ruba cotton of a 9-year-old boy, then that would be okay. The Achronim agree that you should be machmir. That you shouldn't make a bracha on a talis cotton which is so small that it's only enough to cover a 9-year-old boy. If the gadol is embarrassed to go out with such a beged into the shuk. That even if he does go out, lemaisa his botla daita is a kolodom. We sort of ignore his personal preference. Now, how much is shir rosh v'rubai? Kosov b'sefer priharetz b'shem sefer derech chochma sheshiura shloishes rivoy amo. Here we go. That the shir is 3/4 of an amo, ba'orech v'chatzi amo b'reichov. And we'll see what that means in centimeters in a minute. There's no real source for this in Shas. Especially when we're talking about the width of the Tallis cotton. By the way, the width is going across the top like that, and the Orach is going to be like that. We'll measure in a second. There's no clear reference to this in Shas. Of a prat mashkos v'chatzam b'bereichov. Minig anshi ma'aser ledaktig shebei amma melefonov amma melachrov. The anshi ma'aser would try and work out that you've got an amma at the bottom and amma at the top. V'nika beis hatzava in ulaminyan, and the whole does not count into the measurements. So take a look at 5 and 6 in the Dirsha notes, because there he gives the shiurim. V'shir amma kosov b'sefer shiurim shel Torah. Shelafidas hachaznish who 58 centimeters. V'ashein halochas kosov sheyesh tov liasus 60 centimeters. V'chein kosov chaznish mitzvah says case had v'rochav talis 60 centimeters. Uledvarov shleishes revi amma who 44 centimeters. So therefore 3/4 of an amma will be 44 centimeters. And then jumping ulefi hagan Reb Chaim Noah shir amma who 48 centimeters v'shir shleishes revi amma who 36 centimeters. So how do you measure? So you're measuring from the back of this. Imagine, so this is the tzitzis. This is where you put your head. So you measure the back here. This should be an amma. So it will be, that goes to 30. So that is, oops, I lost it. So you've got, this will be an amma, right? That measurement will be an amma at the back, and you have an amma at the front. And then at the side you'll have that's the Orach. So that needs to be the chatchila, according to what Mishnah Berurah just said, an amma, and across the top you would need shesh amma lefon of amma la'achrov, and the neck doesn't count. Or with talis cotton yesh v'yotz b'zem asfeikas v'yochel levarech alav. Fine. V'al kol ponim. But what's the minimum? Lo yivches mishleish revei amma. You shouldn't go less than 3/4 of an amma. So according to Rabbi Chaim Noah, that would be 36 centimeters, which is obviously much less than that. Because less than that, you're going to have a bracha levatala. Because the shear of Rosh V'Ruba of a cotton is going to be an amma v'chetzi, 1.5 ammas, v'ayim v'halacha. Good, and therefore, so you've got an amma and a chetzi will be the shear, 3/4 of the front and 3/4 of the back. Then you're okay. Again, according to the minimum shear of the Rabbi Chaim Noah, that's 36 centimeters, which is not that much, right? That's 30 centimeters. We're talking about that much. So for the whole back of the tzitzis, our tzitzis are bigger, but bigger than that. Okay. Good. Umashenagin. Carrying on in this Mishnah Berurah. Umashenagin Ashkenazim shalokhin chatichas beged cotton echod melefonov ve'echod melacharov ve'toifrim v'ritzuas v'eisen bohem sitzis. For those people who take a patch of beged and then they put a patch of beged on the front and they put a strap to connect the two, that doesn't count for sitzis. Aside from the fact that being mevatel mitzvah of sitzis, every time you make a bracha levatala, there's a problem with sissa. Also, lots of Shabbos, and there's carrying issues on Shabbos. That's like we've already covered. If the person does this, you should make a bracha on it. You make a bracha on the Tallis Gadol, and then you can go with that the whole day. So minimally, at least you're not being mevat. You're thinking about the mitzvah. This is a zeicha ba'alma, but you haven't made a bracha vatala because you made a bracha on the Tallis Gadol. And even if you wear a smaller beged, then you haven't made a bracha batala. Avol Yirei Shamayim lo yismach al zeh klal. Yirei Shamayim should not be soimech on this. Eliyas a beged mamish. You should make a proper beged. Kol medina lefi minhagoi. Every country according to their minhag. Ubeizim mekomis nagim shabeged hanikra kemizil a vest who pasuach min archav oisin by tzitzis bedalet knafos. This is like the vest tzitzis that we've seen and we've spoken about, that you have like a vest type of material and you open it down the side and you can make a tzitzis with that. Rak shetzorech lezoy sheyeh ruba pasuach. The side should be rubai pasuach. So you say you got four corners. V'chein betalis cotton she'oisin b'dinaseni yizar b'zeh. V'ayin le'al b'simen yud. Sif Zayin v'ches, Mashe Kosav Nisham. Kosav Hari. Talis Kosan Yoytze Toiv Shelo Yeh Be'bote Zroyes. It shouldn't have sleeves. So imagine you've got like a t-shirt, and it's a long sleeve t-shirt. So you've got like that. Imagine you haven't got a beggar. So you've got a long sleeve t-shirt with sleeves, and you slit the side down the sides. So you say, hey, I've got a long sleeve t-shirt. All of the vest sitzes don't have sleeves on them. Why? Because the Arizal says it's better to have them without the sleeves. Yeah, now carrying on, let's just finish off. Im lovash hatalis v'niskapel ksas. Eli, this is your point. If you're wearing a talis, so we've got the shiurim we've spoken about, ideally an amma down the side, or at least 3/4 of an amma, which according to Chaim will be 36 centimeters. But what if you get folded over? Or it gets squashed, and that's how it gets. Under a shirt, often it gets squashed. So how do you deal with that? It says the Mishnah Berurah at the bottom, that's the nature of wearing clothes, they get sort of crumpled. But once it's crumpled, you haven't got this shear anymore. Kosul b'tshuvas beis Yaakov, Simon Kuvov, the kiven she'omed lispashet, kaposhet do me'afshel lispashet adayin. Since it's omed lispashet, you can straighten it out, it's considered as if it's full, and therefore you've got the proper shear. V'har yesh b'kashir, ayin sham, v'ayin b'mnechiyat halis cotton sheyesh b'kadei l'chatzas rishvur, b'v'aldei atfira, ein bo shear, potzim esitzis, shem simon, but if the stitching is going to give you the shear, then that would not be good enough. Just very quickly, in footnote number 10, what about a tallis that shrinks in the wash? Is that the same as a crumpled tallis? So he says no. In footnote 10 he says, "L'gabi tallis niskvatz bekvisa v'nifchas shiura," and it gets shrunk in the wash. Daik b'shal shuvah zolet tzion b'divra beis Yaakov sherak k'she'imedes lachsav nispashet nechshav sheyesh b'adayin shear. If it gets crumpled, you can open it up, and therefore it's as if it's got the proper shear. Avol k'she'iskavtzu le'isachsav l'shira hakodim. But if it gets shrunk, you're not going to return to its original state. Ein להחשיב לפי מידוסה שבתחילה ולכן לכתחילה יש לעשות כשיר כזה שגם אחר הקיבוץ יישאר בשיר טלס. That after the washing, it's still got that shear. Okay.